I noticed that throughout this channel, this is a visual novel that I reference constantly in my videos, or at least the 2016 to 2017 era. But I never actually spent a dedicated video on talking about why this is such an amazing visual novel that absolutely deserves your time. Fun fact, the outfit for my avatar is basically a recolor of Katawa Shoujo's male student outfit from green to blue, so I guess you can say that Katawa Shoujo sort of defines this channel. Katawa Shoujo is a visual novel that is so good that I can safely recommend it to everyone, even for those who don't like visual novels. It's an incredibly heartwarming and incredibly touching visual novel that becomes my favorite of all time. You can get this visual novel for free. I'm not kidding. The visual novel can be had for free and it runs on anything these days. So there's no excuse for you to not play this freaking masterpiece. Does that sell you in Katawa Shoujo? If it doesn't, well, let's talk about it in detail. This video is brought to you by my wonderful patrons and donators. You can support this channel too by checking the links down below. Katawa Shoujo is a visual novel developed by 4 Leaf Studios, which is basically 4chan, because that's where most of the developers come from. The game's original concept was actually from an artist named Raita, and if you don't know who Raita is, he's the original character designer for multiple Fate Grand Order characters, and this little JRPG series that you might not be too familiar with called Valkyria Chronicles. He had a concept for a visual novel involving girls who are disabled, so a bunch of people at 4chan really loved the idea, and they just tried to develop a visual novel out of it. And it's not just a joke visual novel either. It's a genuine visual novel that does take itself seriously and handles the topic of the discussion respectfully. This game took years to develop. There are hundreds of people going in and out of the game's development. The first demo titled Act 1 was released in May 2009 and covers the entire first act of the game before it branches to specific paths. The full version of the game was finally released on January 4th, 2012, which means that this game has been on the internet for 8 years now. Man, how times have passed. The story of the game is about Hisao Nakai, an ordinary teenager living an ordinary life just like any other visual novel protagonist. But then Hisao's life turned upside down as he suffered from a heart defect called arrhythmia. This forced him to attend a new school after a really long stay in the hospital. The new school that he's attending to is the Yamaku High School, which is basically a school for the disabled, and let's just say that he doesn't really like the prospect of entering it. But regardless, he accepted his fate and he's gonna start a new journey full of friendship and possibly even love. The visual novel does have the typical visual novel mechanics, so you're mostly gonna be reading through the game's text and imagining the things as you go forward. There are no voices in the game, which is totally fine because I prefer to read my visual novels as opposed to have someone else read it out loud for me. There are 5 main routes with 1 extra really bad ending that you can get through this game. This game's flowchart is a bit confusing and it's rather difficult to unlock the route to some of the characters. As for the ending, all of the characters have their good and bad endings, but even if you're only aiming for the good ones, rest assured that you're gonna spend a lot of time with this game. Expect 50 to 20 hours of playthrough for all the routes. Unfortunately, the game has very limited options menu, and as far as I know, there's no HD or 4K remaster on this game for those who have beefier systems and want to see this game in higher resolutions. That's a shame, but what do you expect from a game developed by a bunch of people at 4chan? So why is this game so good, and why is this one of my favorite visual novels of all time? Well, it's very simple really. The game truly exceeds what it aims to be. Characters, writing, story, comedy, you name it, and the game just excels on it. All the major cast members in this game are just, well, people. Some of them just so happen to have disabilities. Yes, these people have additional obstacles that they need to overcome, and yes, some of them need to receive special treatment, but for the most part, they're still treated like your normal everyday high schooler who have very human issues. This is an incredibly interesting perspective that feels familiar but also different at the same time. You're still able to resonate with the high school setting, even if it's not the typical high school setting that most visual novels or animes depict. This down-to-earth portrayal of the characters make them incredibly easy to relate to. All of them have personal issues that pretty much anyone in some form of way can relate. So I'm gonna talk about each routes and what makes them so good and special to my eyes. Oh boy, Shizune. I feel really bad for Shizune. You can ask a lot of people on who their Katawa Shoujo waifu is, and their picks would definitely land on any of the 4 candidates, but I can guarantee you that none of them would pick Shizune. Why? Well, it's not really anyone's fault but Shizune herself. Despite one of the very first few people who made contact with you on the school, Shizune definitely made a rather weak impression in the game. She's portrayed as the bossy student council president figure and consistently pressuring you, Hisao, to join the student council with Misha. Not only that, but her competitive and manipulative attitude make her to be an unwelcoming presence in general. It's really strange that Shizune is people's least favorite waifu when Makoto Nijima from Persona 5 is a lot of people's top tier Persona waifus. They're both student council presidents, they both pressure the player into abiding the rules, they both have that competitive and bossy spirit that kind of drive people away from them. You might not remember the fact that Makoto herself doesn't have a lot of friends before she meets up with the Phantom Thieves, and they both also have that terrifying party pooper presence. Like the moment they show up, all the fun got sucked out of the room instantly. Read the Persona 5 Dengeki manga for more details on that. So they both have similarities, but why is Shizune despised and Makoto praised? Well, Makoto has that childish naivete on her that made her to be cute and endearing, and there aren't really a lot of moments in the game where Makoto truly showed her bossy and over-controlling attitude. Shizune, however, she's bossy and controlling from the very start, and while she was quite prominent throughout the intro, there aren't many times where she showed her most attractive side, and actually, come to think of it, what is her attractive side? No, seriously, I'm trying to think of her most attractive side on at least the most surface level. The attractiveness of other characters are pretty much evident on surface level. Rin has her quirky, snarky weirdness, Lily has her calm and collected attitude, Emi is cheerful, happy, energetic, and wants you to work out, and that's my personal pick, and Hanako has the most attractive traits of them all, being a shy and awkward girl. Shizune, however, she was rather controlling and manipulative, and I'm not seeing the appeal for her. Is it because she's dominant? Is her overly controlling attitude something that some people find appealing? Is it because she wears glasses? Yeah, it's precisely because she wears glasses. And to me at least, the reason why she is less appealing to date compared to someone like, say, Makoto for example, is because we get to see Makoto being conflicted, troubled, and stupid early on. Makoto is a student council president figure who tries to uphold the rules, but is incredibly naive in dealing with the real world. Shizune is an overly bossy and competitive stuck-up figure that tries to be so perfect to everyone and wants everyone to be just as good as her. Funny that she criticized Lily for appearing as someone who presents herself as perfect, while she herself is doing exactly that, except she's bossy and obnoxious. So rest assured, I can totally understand why people are not a fan of Shizune. And that's precisely why I played Shizune's routes first in this replay. I mean, she is one of the very first few people who made contact with Hisao when he came to the school, so might as well indulge in the offer, right? So Hisao joins in the student council, and this is where I realize another reason why people aren't a fan of Shizune's route is because things got, well, rather uneventful, or at least compared to the other routes. It's not that nothing happens, things do happen, it's just that they're not as interesting as any of the other routes. To put it in perspective, I don't think there's any moment where Shizune actually cries. Any other routes will feature the character crying at some point, and it's important to have that to show them at their most vulnerable. But Shizune doesn't show her weaknesses too much. Sure, it's totally in character, but not so good for making her to be relatable to the player or make us to understand her issues. And no, I'm not saying we should deliberately make her cry, that's awful, but I'm just saying that it's unfair that the other characters suffer from emotional breakdowns when she just dodged the bullet, I guess. That being said, this isn't a bad route at all. This one is still good for a rather interesting meta fashion. How so? Well, Shizune's route is centered on one issue, and that issue is communication. I mean, obviously, Shizune is deaf, and therefore communication is a real issue, but what differentiates Shizune from characters with communication issues like Hanako and Rin is the fact that Shizune actually commits to communicating her intent. It's just that she's really bad at communicating it, not just verbally, but also in general. And this is what makes Shizune's route compelling and interesting, despite her flaws as a character. That overly bossy, overly competitive, and massively controlling attitude are made with genuinely good intentions. She does all of that because she genuinely wants Hisao to cheer up and not be depressed and gloomy about his sickness all the time. And this actually worked on Hisao if you made him to stay all the way through her antics, and even if he hangs out with anyone else other than her and Misha, except for Kenji because him leads to the bad ending, but her methods doesn't always work on everyone that she meets, which is why the student council hasn't been getting a lot of members lately and why she's desperate on getting new members in. To put it simply, her attempts on having everyone to be closer to her is only pushing everybody away, and one of the main issues of the entire route is the fact that her attitude is also pushing Misha away, her best friend and perhaps only friend in the entire school. That's the irony of the entire conversation, and that's the saddest part of this route as a whole. This route has an interesting message on communicating intent, but the character being used to talk about the topic is designed to push people away, because that's just the nature of her character. That's the point of her character. That's why I call this route quiet meta. The route's interesting topic is being badly conveyed by the character, just like how the character's good intentions are badly communicated by her actions. Playing through Shizune's route made me to have a newfound appreciation on it for trying, but that still doesn't mean that it's flawless. Like I said before, there aren't a lot of times where Shizune truly shows her most vulnerable side. She always showed some sense of determination and strength, which is cool, but it would be more interesting to see her at her breaking point too. That's the point in playing her route. It's not fair that we see it in other characters and not her. I kind of feel like her good ending would be more impactful if some elements from the bad ending are incorporated into the good ending, because the bad ending does have her to realize her mistakes and trying to fix things up, except in a much stronger and more impactful manner, in my opinion. The only character who truly does have a breaking point moment was Misha, and come to think of it, this route spends quite a lot of time focusing on Misha's troubles, a lot more than Shizune's own troubles. I mean, sure, Misha's trouble is done to highlight a core component in Shizune's trouble, but the route spends a lot of time fixing Misha's emotions rather than fixing Shizune's emotions. And the worst part is that the resolution is thanks to Hisao fixing it by proxy and not Shizune doing it herself and realizing the error of her ways in the process. So rest assured, there's not a lot of development in her to truly make her compelling or relatable, even in the route. That being said, Misha's character arc is actually very good in this one. Misha's arc deals with rejection. Who rejected her? That's a spoiler. Regardless, I absolutely love the way the story deals with her emotional turmoil after that rejection. She tries so hard to make everyone to be happy and her closest friends to be happy that she practically rejected her own happiness. She's a character who puts on the mask of this cheerful, if a bit annoying girl to hide her own sadness. And she's not the only one in this entire game. So while I do like that some part of her route is dedicated on Misha, I just wish that Shizune would have a little bit more struggle. Shizune's route is definitely very flawed, but flawed in a fashion that I find really interesting. It's a route that could have been better in communicating its intent, the same way how the character of that route could have done better in communicating her intent. It's a route that managed to personify the character quite well, something that has good intentions but are totally totally misunderstood by its ways of conveying them. It's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, and Shizune is still not the best waifu choice out of all of them in my opinion, but I still appreciate it for what it tries to do. Now that we've done with everyone's least favorite waifu, let's talk about everyone's most favorite waifu, because of course she is. Hanako, the really shy and awkward girl who got half of her skin burned off, who becomes an absolute darling for a lot of people who played the game. You just want to take care of her and give her all the love you want. Of course, Hanako is everybody's number one, but it's not my personal number one waifu pick because my taste is better than you guys. I'm kidding. Let's talk about Hanako. Hanako is a very special route. It's a route that I'm actually kind of nervous going through the first time because you don't really know if your actions would lead into Hanako snapping or suffering from panic attacks. All that you can do is to treat her like a friend and just do what you both enjoy to do. So while there are quite a lot of happy, cheerful, wholesome, and even cute moments going through the route, thanks to Hanako's shyness and fragile nature, there's a lot of tense and worrying atmosphere as you get through it, as if you're walking on eggshells or something. This is particularly accentuated during a moment in the route where Hanako is doing group work with Hisao, Shizune, and Misha. Shizune and Misha are being incredibly pushy and aggressive for a specific event as usual, and that caused Hanako to have a bit of a panic attack, which again just accentuates their incredibly poor ways of conveying their genuinely good intentions. Both Misha and Shizune genuinely don't know about what triggers Hanako's emotional distress. It's not that they did it intentionally, like that part in Shizune's route where I really want to slap her face. The main issues that Hanako's route talk about are introversion, isolation, and dealing with someone as emotionally fragile as her. Do you treat her as if she's a child who needs constant protection from everybody, or do you put her in equal footing to you? Wouldn't treating her as equal means that she should be subjected with an equal amount of pressure that a lot of normal people deal with, something that she probably couldn't handle? Do you think that she can deal with the fact that she's being treated equally? It's all very interesting questions that are brought up throughout the route, especially for people who don't really have too much experience with people and have a general apathy towards people in general. Going through her route, I can totally see why Hanako is people's favorite. It's not just on the surface level that she has an attractive personality trait that a lot of weebs would just go heads and heels for. It's also the fact that she is irresistibly adorable. Beneath all of that introverted, fragile, and scarred figure is a more childlike and happy personality being suppressed thanks to past traumas. You notice this quite a lot as you get through the routes. The very small interaction between the two of you and the small times where she genuinely smiles and chuckles. While there's not a lot of communication between Hanako and many of the characters, that's what makes it better. The little communication that they have just make the moments where they do communicate a lot more precious and endearing. And the little moments where she's enjoying herself is the moment where the player is feeling very happy inside too. And that's what really makes this route special to a lot of people. Hanako's introversion and aversion towards any sorts of social activities are things that a lot of people can relate to. Hanako's personality in general is something that a lot of people can relate to. When Hanako feels sad, you do feel sad. When Hanako feels pressured, you do feel pressured. To a lot of people, Hanako feels like a representation of their most fragile side, and you don't know if it's something that you have to keep secret or something that you have to eventually open up to people and trust them with it. Trust is a major component in this route. Trust is something that you don't easily give to someone. The two characters who truly understand this are Hanako and Hisao. The chemistry between the two of them, slowly giving their trust towards each other, are one of the best in the game, as both of them are slowly opening themselves to talk about their darkest and most vulnerable moments. Hanako's character development is actually another part that I really love about this route. While Hanako's aversion towards social interaction is a part of her character, I love how as time goes on, she's the one making the initiative of socializing and wanting to hang out with Hisao a lot more. I also love the fact that she herself takes the initiative of telling her backstory to Hisao, because she thought it was unfair that she knew about Hisao's backstory and not hers. It gives her her a lot more sense of empathy and bravery. That level of relatability is what makes Hanako's route the best route for a lot of people, and in some ways, the most emotional route too. The route didn't dabble too much on her backstory, but you still feel the weight and emotion of that event persisting through her route as you go on. Surprisingly enough, there aren't a lot of times where Hanako feels like she's on her weakest point and just break down crying. But that's good, because when it does happen, it's quite harrowing, especially once you figure out the reason why she broke down that way. You too have that sense of worry in you and that sense of wanting to protect her, even though that's not really what she wanted, because she's not as fragile as she might seem, and she doesn't want people to treat her that way all the time. If there's one thing that I want to criticize about this route, is that it ends in a point where I don't want it to end. Without spoiling too much, this route ends at a point where any other route would have put it as their halfway point. But considering that this is Hanako we're talking about, I guess keeping the future ambiguous is better in the long term, but I would love to see what's going on next and the turmoils that would happen between Hisao and Hanako. I would love for the story to go a little bit further and make Hanako to confront new issues in her life, as opposed to confronting the old issues that she has been facing. But regardless, Hanako is amazing, her route is amazing, and I'm not surprised that she's everybody's first pick. And if my fourth route received that amount of praise, I can assure you the other three routes are just as incredible. I'm not really sure why, but I always put Rin as the third waifu that I want to cover, and my third best. Rin, not to be confused with the other Rin from another visual novel I reviewed, is a girl with no arms. Your first meeting with her highlights her unique personality. She's a very kooky, ditzy, and snarky type who takes quite a lot of things either too literally or too figuratively. She's quite an eccentric character, and conveniently enough, she's an artist, and artists are generally quite eccentric. She draws using her legs and is actually really good at it. I drew with my legs once. The crayons smell like dog poo. Rin is definitely a really odd route. I mean, sure, she herself is quite an oddball, but her route is surprisingly quite emotional. Both Rin and Hanako's route actually deal with the overall theme of wanting to be supported and understood, except Hanako is easy to be put under pressure, and her route gives that walking in eggshell sort of tension, which is why you kind of anticipate her when she feels pressure. This doesn't happen with Rin, or the next two characters. Rin is not like Hanako. She's a dorky, weird, snarky, and sometimes unintentionally humorous person. She's pretty much able to keep herself cool, so when she gets conflicted, emotional, and breaks down in tears, you know that something bad must have happened to her. When you first met up with Rin, she displays a behavior that is unlike any fictional character that I've seen in ever, actually. I've never really met a fictional character that behaves quite a lot like Rin, not even like 80% of Rin. Whenever you talk to her, she always takes a lot of things that you say either too literally or too figuratively. The way she processes the things that you say is somewhat logical but somewhat nonsensical at the same time. While Shizune poorly communicates her intent, Rin poorly communicates in general. Communicating with her is a challenge in and of itself. You can somewhat understand her, but at the same time, you can make zero sense of what she's trying to say. I find it really appropriate that she's an artist because her bizarre, unpredictable, and really hard to understand personality kind of reflects the nature of our own artistic desires in general. It is bizarre, it is unpredictable, and really hard for other people to understand. Art is something that can be difficult to explain and can be difficult to understand. While there are times where you can explain the drawings, you can't really explain why you do it. You can't explain what makes you to like what you do, you just do. The game has a really interesting discussion about art. It talks about how art is something that just exists, and that human beings who make art do them because they must do them, and they must do them because Because that's what makes Rin's route so relatable. It's not just her snarky, deadpan, asocial behavior, it's her being an artist in general. To me, Rin is a representation of our own creative desires, something that's incredibly difficult to either explain or justify. A lot of us have hobbies or things that we like to do or make, whatever works of art that fancy you, such as music, drawings, videos, fan fictions, etc. It's something that we can't really explain why we do them. We just do them because we like them, and we like them because it's fun, and it's fun because, well, it is. And we keep on doing them because we have that sense of feeling that we must do them, especially if it's fun. That's basically how Rin's personality is. She has never been the simple-minded or literal sorts of type. Even if you try to be simple and literal with her, she will always find a way to make it philosophical and needlessly complicating. And speaking of philosophy, I also really love how philosophical this route is. This is the sort of route that would make you to contemplate about whatever things that the game talks about. Other than about the nature of art, this game has a really deep and intriguing discussion about clouds. It actually made me to second guess the nature of all those puffy little things in the sky, and I won't spoil how it goes, but it really makes me think. But it's not all philosophical, and Rin's route has perhaps one of the funniest dialogues in the entire game. It's thanks to Rin's deadpan snarky attitude and her taking a lot of things too literally. You can't really call it sarcastic because she herself isn't aware that she's being sarcastic, so going through the route is quite an entertaining ride. It not only made you think and contemplate, but it also made you laugh as well. And of course, thanks to her complications in communicating, Rin's lack of social circle is something that she accepted. But it's not her lack of friends that she has struggles with, it's her inability to make people to understand her. Shizune can't befriend people because she's incredibly harsh. Hanako can't befriend people because she's really shy and can succumb to social pressure very easily, and she doesn't like people in general. Rin, however, can't befriend people because she doesn't understand how to express herself to people. A lot of the routes deal with the issue of communication and understanding, but Rin is the type of person who is very hard to be understood, can't be understood, and maybe doesn't really want people to understand her. She just needs to exist, and people just need to accept her for what she is. Interestingly enough, the route's main theme is about change, and whether or not you're prepared for that sort of thing. It explores the benefits and the consequences of that change, and the reason why you have to make it. Are you doing it for your own good, or are you doing it for the benefit of others? The route also explores how that changing process might or might not go against your true self, and how it can truly transform you into something that you are not. The theme uses artworks as a way to highlight that change. The things that you make in life do leave a mark of yourself into the world that you live in. Those marks that you left in the world also mark the change that you experience throughout your life. This is true for a lot of us, and that's what really resonates a lot of people with Rin's route. Rin is one of those people who are unprepared for that change, and her route is basically her trying to commit to that change until she realized that it might have gone in a way that she doesn't want it to be, because she eventually has to quite literally destroy herself in the process, just like a lot of artists in real life. As she gets through that change, it becomes overwhelming for her, especially how that change has radically altered her to the point where it goes against her more natural personality, all because of the needs to conform towards anyone else's expectations. Remember when I say that Rin is not the type of person who cries? Because she's really not. That is until she has to be confronted with herself. The image of her that she and a lot of people around her has difficulties in understanding, and her not being able to understand herself and what she truly wants is terrifying for her. I can go on and on about how Rin's route is a roller coaster of an emotion, but I need to conclude this real quick. Rin's route delves into the weird, creative, and eccentric side of our psyche, and how those traits can lead into a destructive behavior, not just towards oneself, but also towards anyone around. It's a route that confronts us about the nature of change and the nature of oneself. It's a route that talks about the silliness of life and also the harsh complexities of life, in a manner that only an eccentric, deadpan, snarky artist like Rin could ever deliver. It's a fantastic route all the way through, and there's really nothing quite like it. And that's only my third favorite route. We have 2 more to go. And here's my second favorite route in the entire game. Lily's route is fairly straightforward, as Lily has no issues with communicating with Hisao and the rest of the characters. In fact, Lily is a very popular girl in the school that is well received by everyone around. She acts as the mother figure for the class that she's in, and also a big sister figure for both Hanako and Hisao throughout the route, as opposed to Shizune, who basically acts like a dictator throughout. She's the one who seems to have been in control of a lot of things and be able to take care of herself. Now, how can we utterly destroy this character and break her down into tears? Yeah, this route is really not kind towards her. I can say that to the rest of the characters, but Lily in particular is special to me simply because she's not the type of person who would break down in tears. A little bit of fun fact about Lily: her initial character draft basically makes her to be a Mary Sue sort of character. In a sense, she kind of is. She's born from a very rich family, she gets along with everybody, and she keeps her composure when dealing with a lot of problems. In reality, she's just a normal human being who just so happened to be easygoing and welcoming and managed to keep her cool. Lily's route is basically the polar opposite of Shizune, which is apt because they're also polar opposites. Unlike Shizune, Lily is nice and incredibly welcoming, but she too has her own issues that she has to deal with. Her Mary Sue-like perfect image is merely a mask for her to truly hide away her real emotions, things that many other people, including even her closest friends and families, are unable to read. There are many times where she really can't hide her true emotions away. In a sense, she's less of a Mary Sue and more of a person who puts on the Mary Sue mask, and this route is what happens if you keep on putting that mask all the time. Eventually, you're gonna have to take it off, or someone else will. So what is the main discussion of Lily's route? This one is a little bit more difficult to explain because her route doesn't really focus on a specific theme, or at least on surface. I suppose there's the discussion of family and friendship and how blood relations don't necessarily mean actual relation. In that regard, Lily's route shows a rather interesting and unique perspective regarding friendship that I don't think has ever been done in a lot of fictions before, and there's no other character that presents this topic better than Lily. As I said before, Lily is a very welcoming and friendly person, so it's no surprise that there are a lot of people who like her and want to befriend with her. And yet despite all of that, she doesn't really have a lot of true friends. She has a much better relationship ties with Hanako and Hisao if you chose her route right here. She's an incredibly nice and welcoming person that everyone loves, but there are only very few people that she truly loves herself, one that she would hold dearly to her heart and never want to let go. In other words, everyone is close to her, but she herself doesn't really feel close to everyone. It's a really interesting deconstruction of the mentality that a lot of shonen anime or manga promote, which is to be friends with everybody. Lily's route is one of the few fictional stories that I've seen that suggests, you know what, you can be nice to everyone, but you don't have to be friends with everyone. That's why I feel Lily's route is particularly unique. Other routes have characters that don't really have a lot of friends because of one reason after another. Lily does have friends. You might even think that she has quite a lot of them, but in reality, she has a lot of acquaintances and people who look up to her and admire her, but only very few friends, as in people who truly understand her in a more emotional level, people whom she can truly trust at her deepest and most vulnerable side. What made her to be even more interesting and relatable to me at least is the fact that she is a part of a very big family. She has family and friends in Japan, and she's more familiar with her family and friends in Japan, but she also has families in Scotland, a lot of which she's not that familiar with. Despite having so many people around her, including her classmates and family members supporting her and admiring her, she herself doesn't truly feel like she's close to these people. Sure, she will treat them just as well as any other people would, but she wouldn't really share her deeper, vulnerable side to them. That's where Hisao comes in, and to a lesser extent, even Hanako, who also in this specific route has a very subtle character development in the background. A lot of other routes feel like the characters are in a pack of crowds with people who don't know them and probably don't want to know them. This route is what happens when people around you pay attention to you because they admire you and you're a welcoming and comforting figure to them, but you yourself cannot relate to those people for the same reason, and thus that disconnect is what really prevents you from being able to truly achieve that happiness in your life. And that's what this route is primarily all about. It's about striving to find that happiness in your life, regardless of your familial ties for Lily and your past for Hisao. And speaking of Hisao, this is probably the route that focuses a lot more on him. I mean, yes, there are other routes that do double on him as well, but I think his flaws are a lot more apparent here. I think it's because of the alcohol, which he consumes quite a lot compared to the rest of the routes, and that leads to a lot of heart attacks. But it's also because of that warmth and comfort that he got with Liliy that make him truly vulnerable. Liliy has practically turned into the reason why he wants to continue his life. This is a route where I feel like he has changed so much and ironically also destroyed himself so much, especially with that alcohol. There's even a time where Misha and Shizune ask him for work, which he usually denies because it's Misha and Shizune, but he straight up accepted them, which totally surprised Misha and Shizune, and that's all because of Liliy. Liliy has given him a new perspective and a newfound appreciation of the future, while Liliy has her own familial and friendship issues that she deals with. Since the route is all taking place in Hisao's perspective, the route is about Hisao trying to achieve that happiness. I feel like this is the route where Hisao is truly at his happiest. A lot of the routes are about Hisao trying to figure out what makes his love interest truly happy. This route, despite being about Liliy, is more about what makes Hisao truly happy. It's about him trying to break free from the chains of his past and trying to hold off to the person that becomes the one reason why he's alive. It's the one route where you can truly feel like he's actually legitimately fighting for that love and that future. And the fact that Hisao has to fight his own sickness to strive for that happiness is something that is quite inspirational. That's why Liliy is my second favorite route. And if those reasons don't convince you, Liliy is a massive pervert and she has a lot of coffee scenes compared to the rest. Finally, after all the waifus, you might be asking which one is my personal favorite. Well, you can already guess. It's Emi, the short, legless, and petite high school girl who is a member of the track team and whose smug face is only nearly beating Rin's. And no, it's not because she's the lowly option in the game, it's because she's cheerful, energetic, playful, and immature. Just like a little girl. She's older than Hisao actually, shut up. No, but seriously though, out of all the characters in the game, Emi's route is, in my opinion, the best in the game. Not only that she's straight up the most cheerful, energetic, and most positive thinking character, aside from Misha, who technically doesn't have a route and isn't as annoying, Emi's route actually manages to take a lot of elements from the previous routes and combine them all into one really unique package that also has its own unique things. First off, Emi's route is the easiest to get because most people would instinctively want Hisao to work out and heal his heart better. And that's another reason why this route is great. While Liliy's route provides, in my opinion, the happiest ending for Hisao, Emi's route provides the healthiest route for Hisao. Compared to the rest of the routes, this is where Hisao works out a lot more and therefore becomes a lot healthier in the process. The route is still primarily dealing with Emi's issues, but it also concerns Hisao fighting his actual sickness and staying fit. The second reason, or third, or fourth, I mentioned a couple of points previously, Emi's route is a very funny route, right next to Rin in terms of humor. She's incredibly playful and fun to hang out with, sometimes annoying, but not to a grating degree. It's more of an annoying but also very playful degree. There are also very funny dialogues, and she gets to be the butt of the joke in some conversations. She is so playful and funny that Hisao actually laughed at his own disability, which he hasn't been able to do for a long time. Even the coffee scenes are incredibly playful and hilarious. Some of them at least, but we'll get to that in a bit. This route is so playful, it even makes Shizune and Misha's presence not as controlling. There's part in the game where Misha would pretty much save you from getting the bad ending. Speaking of endings, reaching the good ending to the route is also fairly simple. If anyone is offering you advice, take it. If you have the option to ask for advice, take it. If there's an option for you to pry on Emi's issues, just leave it alone and let her be, because that's just her character. Despite her very cheerful, playful, and energetic personality, she actually doesn't have a lot of friends, or at least very close ones. It basically takes some elements from Liliy's route, the being lonely in a pack of crowds who are comfortable with you element, and it makes a lot of sense in this route too. And that is combined with Shizune's pushing people away sorts of presence. Except unlike Shizune, Emi did it intentionally. Emi's trouble centers primarily around her backstory, and at first, it does sound quite cliched. You can pretty much pick up early on that she had an accident that caused the loss of her legs, and that she lost her father as well. Anyone can put the two and two together. While it's never explicitly stated throughout the route until the very end, you can truly feel that Emi's father has a lot of influence in her. She's pretty much daddy's little girl. She loves her father so much that losing him means losing a significant part of her. It affected her so much, and yet she manages to hide that very well throughout our interactions with her. Like Lily's route, she too wears a mask of being fine, playful, and cheerful all the time, and like Lily's route, it's all up to us to slowly tear that mask down and truly reveal herself. In a lot of ways, Emi reminded me so much of Will Hunting from Good Will Hunting. Emi's loss of her father has affected her so much that she isolates herself with that mask in an almost similar manner to Hanako. I mean, obviously she's not straight up refusing to interact with people, but she still manages to create her own environment of solitude the same way Hanako does, except Hanako has to literally hide and run away from people. Hanako doesn't put on a mask. When Hanako feels pressured, she will actually feel pressured, and you can feel that she is pressured. When Emi feels pressured, she will act like everything is fine. She will tell you to not worry about it too much, and in some ways, you might buy it. You might even be convinced that she's just fine, but for people who are actively trying to get close to her, like Hisao, she will do what it takes to push them away because she doesn't want to suffer the same loss that she experienced years ago. Kind of like Will Hunting, except Will Hunting is more about the fear of rejection, abandonment, and betrayal, while Emi is about the fear of loss. I love how Emi is a runner, and a really good runner at that, because she's not just good at runner physically, but also a good runner mentally. She too is running away as far as possible from her past. She too is running as far as possible from the people who might connect to her in a deeper level. There's a segment in the game where she's in a wheelchair and therefore she can't run. I love that segment so much because not only that she can't run physically, but she also can't run mentally. Her sports activity is basically her way of venting her frustrations and overlooking her sadness. It's her passion. It's something that she loves to do, just like Rin with painting. Now that she can't do it because she pushes herself too much, all of that sadness and despair that she tried to run away from comes back to haunt her again. Considering that Rin is Emi's close friend, I think Rin's unreadable emotions managed to rub off on Emi as well. They're both very hard to guess. They both struggle in expressing themselves, except Rin genuinely doesn't understand how to convey her emotions. Emi does understand, but she doesn't want to show it. The same way Will Hunting doesn't want to show his true emotions, because that would mean opening up to someone and having an emotional connection with them. And when you do, it's what Robin Williams' character said to him in the film.
You don't know about real loss, because that only occurs when you love something more than you love yourself.
And this creates a very interesting atmosphere in the route. For a route that has a cheerful and easygoing character, it's surprisingly tense. That sort of playful nature on her actually turns more and more depressing as you get through the route. It's actually quite amazing in how this route managed to make a playful character who acts playful and happy-go-lucky all the time to be a really depressing one. It's a route that deals with the past and how that past truly defines you, just like Hanako's route. Actually, come to think of it, Hanako and Emi are very similar. Hanako doesn't like people to get close to her because she feels like they're going to hurt her in an emotional level, the same way Emi does. Hanako isolates herself by literally hiding away from society. Emi isolates herself by putting on a happy mask and pushing anyone who tries to get close to her, or her running away from them as far away as possible. It might seem that Emi's route is all about deception, and in a lot of ways it is, and that's why I really love it. This is the route where the main challenge isn't just about figuring out how to get through Emi's problems and slowly let her to open up and be honest about herself, but also about love relationship in general. This is a route that presents a very realistic problem in an ongoing relationship. This route deals with the issue of trust and how much you're willing to give that trust to someone whom you consider your significant other. Are you able to fully commit yourself to giving everything that you have, both physically and mentally? But in terms of relationship issues, my most favorite aspect that they tackled is the difference between being physically close and being actually close. One thing that you need to know about Emi's route is that next to Liliy, Emi has the most coffee scenes, but unlike any other routes where the coffees are treated as more of a reward, this route is where the coffee actually feels significant. It's basically the one point that Robin Williams talked about in that scene in Good Will Hunting. I know I love that film, but still.
If I ask you about women, if you ever give me a syllabus of your personal favorites, you may have even been laid a few times. But you can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy.
And he's totally right. You might have had a lot of coffee with women or men, but you probably never know what it feels like to have that one person who makes you feel totally vulnerable. That one person who you wake up right next to, and when you see him or her, you feel nothing but bliss and happiness. Hisao and Emi had quite a lot of coffee in this route. They kissed quite frequently throughout the route too. In fact, they kissed the most compared to any other character in other routes. But even then, you can still feel the distance. You can still feel that Emi hasn't shown her true colors yet. You can still feel that you'd never truly connect to someone, even though you are literally connecting with them every day. But that's not all. This route also deals with, albeit very briefly, the strange reality that sometimes being in a relationship is not so different than being friends with someone or being close friends with someone. You're still doing what you would do with your friends, like playing around and hanging out together, except it's a little bit more intimate. It's kind of true that romantic relationships are somewhat similar to friendship. At the end of the day, it's a relationship. It's a connection that happens between two individuals, and it's up to them in how they want to approach it. Do they want to be just friends, or do they want to be something more and experiment with new things? In summary, Emi's route is absolutely phenomenal. Emi incorporates a lot of elements from other characters and combines them into one really simple but really impactful package. I love this route compared to any other route, not just because Emi is my personal waifu preference, in terms of personality at least, but because this route is all about what it means to truly love someone. It might not be a unique story, we've heard the story a million times before, it might not have the same unique experience that Rin's route or Hanako's route offered, but it's still a very impactful and brutally realistic route that manages to represent the harsh realities of a lot of relationships these days. It's the one route that truly celebrates what it feels like to love someone, while also realizing and understanding about the bad parts as well. It's a route that teaches us the values of opening yourself, trusting others, and being real. It's a route that teaches us about embracing the past, accepting them, and growing up from them, instead of running away from them, both literally and figuratively. It's a route that teaches us that love is not just about the physical, but it's also about the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. It's all about the deeper connection that you and your significant other will have. I can go on, but let's wrap this up. Emi's route is the first route when I played the game, it's my favorite route, and it's one of the primary reasons and why Katawa Shoujo is my favorite visual novel of all time. And that's my review of Katawa Shoujo. Do you see why this is one of my favorite visual novels of all time? Even when they are flawed, they're still amazing in their own ways. If you haven't played Katawa Shoujo, do yourselves a favor and play this game. The link is down below. It's free, it runs on anything these days, and this is an amazing game if you want to get into the visual novel genre. And this is the longest video that I've ever made for quite a while, so if you guys want to support me in this channel, you can do so by checking the links down below. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.